guys, so I'll talk about transportation in London today. And one of the really good things about London is that at any time of the day or night, if you want to get somewhere, there is a way to get there. And the bad thing about London is that the city is so big that it's impossible to get anywhere for cheap or quick. So I'll start out with the trains, I guess. So the main transportation train that everybody kind of knows about is the subway, which is called the tube here. And the tube, basically, which is AKA the underground, kind of runs the whole city. So London is a massive city. So I'm from Toronto, and in Toronto we have the Young University line, which is yellow, the Bloor line, which is green, Shepherd line, which is purple, and then like a tiny bit of the Scarborough SRT, which is some other blue color maybe. Anyway, it's basically a giant U with the line through it. The London Underground map is like, it looks like there's hundreds of lines there. I think there's actually maybe about 12 or 15 actual tube lines in London. And so there's the underground, the tube. Then there's the overground, which, as you can imagine, is the train's overground. And it basically kind of makes a big circle with a few kind of outlines around more of the outer areas of London. And then there's the DLR, which only kind of runs on the eastern bit of London. I think it stands for Dockland Light Railway or something. Anyway, there are also overground trains that kind of run near the water. There's also the National Rail trains, like choo-choo trains, that mostly come from like outside of London, like for example, Leeds, Manchester, whatever. And they come into London, and a lot of people that live just outside London in the suburbs take it at their stop, and they come into the center of the city to work. That's the National Rails. Then there's a couple other train lines, I think. Then there's buses and etc. So on the underground tube line, there are some lines that you don't really want to take. So when I first got here, I was told, do not take the circle line, which is the yellow one that looks like it goes in a circle, but it doesn't actually go in a circle. It's like a circle that overlaps a bit, so you can't just like sit there and go around. And I think it's one of the oldest lines. So the London Tube Underground is 150 years old. They just had their anniversary this year. And the Circle Line is one of the oldest ones, so it breaks down like every 2 minutes. I think I held off on taking the Circle Line for months when I first got here. And then the one time that I did take it, it broke down. Yeah, bad idea. Don't take the Circle Line. A lot of lines kind of overlap. So the Circle Line goes like this in the central kind of area. Then there's the Piccadilly line kind of crosses it and then goes towards Heathrow Airport. Then there's like the Hammersmith and City line, the pink one that goes like this way. And there's a Metropolitan line that goes this way. Then there's the green line, I forget what it's called, it goes around this way. Anyway, there's lots, and they kind of totally overlap, so you don't have to generally stick to one line if you don't want to. I think the Jubilee line, which is one that I take to go to work every day, the silver one, is one of the newest ones. So all the stations are quite new, quite more modern, things like that. So basically the tubes and the trains operate in zones. So the most central part of London, so what we would call downtown, is Zone 1. And most people, I would say, work in Zone 1, but not a lot of people can afford to live in Zone 1. So a lot of people work in Zone 1 and live in Zone 2. So the further outside from the central city that you go, the higher your zone number, basically. And generally, in my opinion, most younger people, especially expats, stay within the three zones. So either live and work in Zone 1, 2, or 3. The rent prices for places obviously usually would get cheaper as outside you go to the city. But sometimes you got to be careful because the money that you save on the rent for living in Zone 3, for example, and working in Zone 1 may not be an actual saving because you have to pay more on your Oyster card or whatever day pass or whatever you buy to get from Zone 2, Zone 3 to Zone 1. Which brings me to Oyster cards. So Oyster cards are kind of like in Toronto, like the Metro Pass, or in New York, the Metro card. Except that in New York and other places like London, the Metro card or the Oyster card is a refillable card, so you can load it with money and then you use it as you go. The Metro Pass in Toronto is either a weekly or a monthly card that you buy at the beginning of the month or at the end of the month for the next month. And it's just an unlimited use card for that time. So the Oyster card is really good because when I guess the mayor of London decided that they wanted to make transportation a really easy thing for most people, they decided to basically slash the prices in half for Oyster card users. So when you first get an Oyster card, you have to pay like £5 to buy the card, and then you load it with money. And normally, a tube ride within Zone 1 is like £2.40 or something. But if you take the tube line using your Oyster card instead of paying cash, I think it's basically half price. Same thing with buses. Buses are like £2.50 or something like that. But if you pay on your Oyster card, it's like £1.40 or whatever the price may be. So like I said, if you're traveling between 2 different zones or 3 different zones, the more you're paying. But the Oyster cards also have, you can load it with money, like a prepay, and you can just pay as you go. Or you can get like a week pass or a month pass, I think. So I used to do the week passes for Zone 1 and 2, because I used to live in Zone 2 and work in Zone 1. So I would just every week go and, buy the weekly pass, which allows you to basically take Zone 1 and 2 unlimited. That's including the Underground, the Overground, the buses, the National Rail trains, etc. Just everything within Zone 2 and Zone 1 is unlimited, which really works out for your benefit, for your advantage. If you, let's say, I don't know, live on the outskirts of Zone 2 in southeast London, and sometimes it's actually faster to take one of the National Rail trains that goes directly into the city instead of taking 3 different underground lines in connection or whatever. So that's the Underground. Overground is rather new. Overgrounds are new. I think it's maybe just before the Olympics. So, maybe. So it'd be like 5 years old max. Or I could be lying, but I think it's rather new. So it's above ground. Like I said, it's the orange line on the map and kind of takes you in a massive circle. I think on the Overground you can go in a circle. Not that you would want to. And it's generally in Zone 2 and 3. It's faster than the Underground because there's less stops, but it definitely runs less often than the Underground. Like the tube usually runs between like every 3 to 6 minutes, during the busy times, whereas Overground is every like 25 minutes. I've never taken the DLR, but I think it's basically very similar to the Overground. And National Rail, again, is a very handy thing if you're coming directly from like a city outside. Buses. So buses in London are actually really, really cool. And I don't mean cool like it's cool to take, but it's cool in the sense of it's really easy to get around. So in Toronto, I'd be not really likely to get on a bus, generally because they don't really get you anywhere. If I can avoid streetcars, I would as well, because they move at like, not even 5K an hour or something. But the buses in London are great. Not all of them are double-decker. There are some single-decker buses, and they generally kind of run everywhere. And usually, if your travel between, let's say, home and work is not directly from tube to tube stop, it's usually actually faster to get on a bus, especially when the tubes are on strike, which they are next weekend and the weekend after that. So it's generally a lot faster to get on a bus and just go directly from point A to point B instead of like, walk over this way, take a tube that way, transfer a tube that way, and transfer that way and walk. Forget it. Just use the City Mapper app, which is amazing, and figure out your bus route and go. And a lot of the buses are 24-hour as well, so there's night buses. And they're a bit better than the Vomit Rocket in Toronto, which is the 24-hour bus lines in Toronto. But yeah, I would generally not recommend sitting upstairs in the back at 3 in the morning if you're going from like club to home or something. Cabs. There are a few different kinds of cabs. So there's black cabs, which are not necessarily black in color, but it's those like weird shaped, like the typical London black cab, and they seat about one, two, three, four, five, six people. So there's three sitting in the back like you normally would, facing the road. Then there's two seats facing towards those people inside. So the inside carriage is quite big, and you can fit all your suitcases and stuff in there as well. And then one person can sit in the passenger seat of the driver. So black cabs are the most expensive out of all the options for sure, and they're run by the meter. Black cab drivers are independent contractors to the city, so they don't actually work for example, in Toronto, there's a major, taxi companies like Bex or City. There's a few other. I am completely forgetting my cabs now in Toronto, but those bigger companies, you call the dispatcher and you say I want a cab and this, and they just send somebody, or you halo them, and then they're all independently contracted to halo, and they just pick up whoever. So black cabs are independent contractors, and I think whatever money they make is what they make, but they have to go and buy the cab or rent the cab from the city, maybe. And generally, they are very, very, very knowledgeable, because in order to have a black cab driving license, you have to pass a test after studying for like 3 years that basically proves you know London really, really well. And it is a massive city. So generally, if you tell the driver, I'm going to blah, 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 and blah, 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 or this postcode, they're like, yep, got it. And they just take you there. But again, quite expensive. Getting from my house to a friend's house that lives, just north of the central area could easily cost me like 30 to 40 pounds, which is like $80. So that's black cabs. You hail them on the street, or you can halo a lot of the black cabs these days as well, using your Halo app and whatever. Then there are mini cabs. So mini cabs are not minivans necessarily, but mini cabs are what we would consider in Toronto like the Bex. So they're a company that has a fleet of cars, and they hire drivers. There are some well-known mini cab companies in Europe, like Addison Lee, which basically, they have many, many fleets of cars. They're well-established. They're generally trustworthy, etc., etc. Then there are shady as fuck mini cab companies that you generally probably would not want to take. But I think they started regulating the mini cab business in London a few years back as well, because they were experiencing a lot of unpleasant mini cab driving experiences and people getting kidnapped and whatever, because the city didn't control them at the time, I think. But now it's a lot more regulated. So if you're going to order a mini cab, which all of them should be pre-booked, you should never hail a mini cab on the street. They don't generally have the taxi thing at the top of the car. They'll generally have like a pre-booked sign sticker on the window, or they'll have the company name splashed across the back or something. So Addison Lee is a really well-known big one. In the city, Green Tomato cars are actually really well-known as well. If you're north in London, there's the Keen Group, Swiss Cottage Cars, etc., etc. You can just Google and then just read the reviews and ask around. But definitely, I wouldn't recommend just walking up to a random minicab office on the street that you never used before and just being like, yeah, take me somewhere. It is drastically cheaper than a black cab. So the distance that I would go from my house, like my friend's house, for example, across town, that'll cost me 40 pounds on a black cab would be like, I don't know, 15 pounds using a minicab. And don't ask me how they're so much cheaper. I guess because it's a dispatch service and they can. I don't know. But yeah, minicabs are a lot cheaper. A lot of kind of the people that have money, or tourists, or people that don't really know the city or don't trust the system, would generally not take minicabs. They would just order a black cab or hail one on the street, because it's I think known to be more safer. But I take minicabs all the time from Addison Lee or Green Tomato or something. Then there are gypsy cabs. So these are typically the ones that you do not want to take. Actually, always the ones that you don't want to take. So these are they don't belong to a company. They're not a black cab. They don't have a taxi thing at the top of the car. They don't have a sticker telling people that it's a pre-booked car belonging to a company or whatever, or it's fake. Basically, random people driving around saying they'll drive you somewhere for a fee. Do not get in these cars. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty common sense. But yeah, that's about it really. I'll try to put up a map of the London train system just so you can kind of take a look. But if you just Google London train map, it'll generally just show you all the underground lines, the overground lines, the DLR lines, national rail lines, um, and buses are a whole other map altogether. I think the bus maps on the website for TfL, which is Transport for London, which is kind of like the TTC in Toronto, even their bus maps are interactive because they can't actually show all the bus routes in one PDF. You have to like search for a destination, put in the bus number, and then it shows you the route that it goes on because there's so many buses. But yeah, like I said, don't be afraid to take the buses in London. They get you everywhere, and generally a lot faster than the tube. Um, yeah, and the cabs are pretty common sense. Don't take gypsy cabs. Mini cabs are okay as long as they're trustworthy companies, and black cabs are really expensive, but they know everything and everywhere. Uh, yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. I hope that was kind of helpful. I remember when I first came to London, I didn't understand the whole zone situation. And I'll tell you, the biggest lesson I learned was that more than one train comes to the same platform. So don't just jump onto a train that comes to the platform that you're waiting at, because it might not be the one that you want. So in Toronto, if you're on the Young University line going southbound on the platform, train comes, you get on it because that is the only train that's going that way. Here, if you're at like a junction station especially, you're waiting for a particular line of a train going in one direction, you could get on one of 4 different lines and end up in a completely different direction if you don't listen to the PA, or if you don't read the signs, or if you don't look at the train itself, because they don't actually have blatant colors telling you this is the whatever line train. They'll sometimes have these like tiny little stickers in the window saying, district line or circle line or whatever. But yeah, pay attention to where you're going because loads of different trains come to the same platform. And I got lost every single day when I first came to London. It was really, really frustrating. Anyway, yeah, hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys later.